They say a mother's love is a quiet thing, a silent river that flows from one generation to the next. For me, that river wasn't quiet. It was a torrent, a fierce, unwavering current of devotion that had defined my life for the past 5 years. My name is Sarah Miller, and at 55, I had given everything I had and everything my late husband, Robert, had left me to my son, Luke, and his fiancée, Chelsea. Our lives, it seemed, had become a series of unspoken transactions. My monthly Social Security check wasn't for me. It was for the $500 rent on Luke and Chelsea's sleek, city center apartment, a place I had never even stepped foot in. The savings from Robert's life insurance policy weren't for my golden years. They were a financial buffer for their emergencies, which seemed to be as regular as the seasons. A car repair here, an unexpected vet bill there, a sudden need for new furniture to make their place look less student-like. Each request came with a familiar sweetness in Luke's voice, a casual assumption that I would, of course, provide, and I always did. I did it because it was my way of being a mother, a way of staying connected to the boy I had raised. After Robert passed, the silence in our home was deafening. Luke's calls, even for money, were a lifeline. I had convinced myself that my financial support was a form of love, a tangible expression of my role as matriarch. I had a grand vision. I would be the ever-present, ever-giving anchor for their young, modern lives. I would be the grandmother they could always count on, the wise old soul whose home was a sanctuary and whose generosity was a given. My days revolved around their needs. I'd wake up and check my phone, not for messages from friends, but for a text from Luke about a bill or a request for groceries. I'd go to the bank, not to take out money for myself, but to make a wire transfer that would keep their world spinning. I even found a quiet sort of pride in it, a sense of purpose that had been missing since Robert's death. This was my legacy, I told myself. This was how I showed them I loved them. But my grandest purpose, the one I had been preparing for over a year, was the wedding. It was to be the culminating event, the perfect union of my son and the woman who would become his wife. I had spent countless hours imagining the day. Luke, so handsome in his tux, Chelsea, a vision in white, and me, standing proudly in the front row, a smile as wide as the ocean. I had even bought a dress for the occasion, a pale pink satin number that I'd spotted in a boutique downtown. It was an extravagant purchase for me, costing over $200, but I had rationalized it by picturing the wedding photos, the ones where I would look elegant and radiant, a true mother of the groom. The dress now hung in my closet, its silky fabric a silent, mocking reminder of a future that would never be. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. The sun streamed into my living room, and the air was light and warm. I was feeling especially happy that day, filled with the simple joy of anticipating a big event. I dialed Luke's number, my heart fluttering with excitement. I had so many questions: the date, the venue, the guest list. I was about to ask my first question when I heard Chelsea's voice on the other end. "Oh, hi, Sarah," she said, a sickly sweet tone in her voice. "You caught us at a good time." "Hi, honey," I said, a little surprised. I was used to speaking with Luke. "Is Luke around? I just wanted to ask about the wedding plans. Have you guys set a date yet?" The silence that followed was brief but felt impossibly long. I heard a muffled sound in the background, the clink of a glass maybe. Then Chelsea's voice, crisp and clear, cut through the quiet. "Oh, Sarah," she said, and I swear there was a hint of a sneer in her tone. "We already got married yesterday." The words hit me like a physical blow. The sun seemed to lose its warmth, and the colors in my living room faded to gray. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "Married?" I stammered. But you didn't tell me. We didn't want a big deal, you know," she said, her voice dripping with an almost casual cruelty. "It was just a small thing. We only invited special people." Special people. The phrase echoed in my head, each syllable a hammer blow against my fragile sense of self. My mind, in a desperate attempt to make sense of it, reeled with questions. Who were these special people? Were they Chelsea's parents, her siblings, the friends they socialized with at trendy bars? And if they were the special people, what did that make me? The woman who had bankrolled their lives, the silent provider, the one who existed only to give and never to receive. I looked down at the phone in my hand, as if it were 1,000-pound weight, and I finally understood. I wasn't a person to them. I was a resource. I was the silent river, and they had just dammed it up. I stood there in the living room of the house that had once been filled with laughter and love, a stranger in my own home. I watched as Luke walked into the frame, an indifferent expression on his face. He avoided my gaze, and in that moment, I saw not the little boy who used to cling to my hand, but a grown man who had learned to look right through me. And as Chelsea's chilling smile widened, making herself comfortable on the sofa I had bought for them, I knew something in me had shattered. The illusion of being part of the most important day of my only son's life had vanished, leaving behind a wound that I feared would never heal. The click of the phone as I hung up was as final as the closing of a coffin lid. The silence that followed was so deep, so absolute, it was as if my ears had gone numb. I stood frozen, staring at the phone, as if the device itself held the key to an impossible truth. My mind, which had always been a neat and orderly file cabinet, was now a whirlwind of scattered papers. The details, the promises, the years of sacrifice all came crashing down in a chaotic, painful torrent. I was a mother, but not the kind they invited to the wedding. I was a bank, an ATM with feelings that apparently had no bearing on my value. And then the numbness gave way to a cold, searing anger. It started as a faint tremor in my hands, a low hum beneath my skin. It built slowly, like a storm gathering strength on the horizon. The anger wasn't just about the wedding. It was about every check I'd written, every grocery trip I'd made, every piece of furniture I'd painstakingly selected. It was about the 3 years I had faithfully paid their rent, the rent on an apartment I had never seen, for a life I was not a part of. The rent at $1,500 a month had bled my savings dry, penny by painful penny. I had convinced myself that this was a mother's duty, a testament to my love, but now I saw it for what it was, a transaction. My love was being monetized. My generosity was being treated as a given. I walked to my small home office, my steps heavy, and pulled out the ancient checkbook ledger and a stack of bank statements. My late husband, Robert, had always been meticulous with our finances, and I had continued the practice. Now, as I sat at my desk, I began to do the math, a grim accountant tallying a debt that could never be repaid. The ledger pages were a sea of numbers, each one a memory, each a small piece of my life handed over to them. There was the first month's rent, the excitement of helping them start their new life. Then the second, and the third, and the 36th. $1,500 multiplied by 36 months. The number on my calculator's screen, $54,000, was a staggering, almost obscene figure. It felt like an accusation, and that was just the rent. I flipped through the statements, finding other transactions. $2,000 car repair. $500 trip to the emergency vet for their new puppy. Christmas gifts, birthday presents, all marked with the telltale phrase, "To Luke and Chelsea." I found a line item for a new laptop, another for a set of designer chairs, and a third for a weekend trip to Napa Valley, all of which had been emergencies in their own right, and all of which I had paid for without question. The total grew, a monstrous sum that threatened to consume me. Over $80,000 in 5 years. $80,000 that was meant for my retirement, for a small trip to Italy, for the peace of mind that comes with security in your later years. I looked at the number and felt a strange calm settle over me, a cold, hard clarity that had been buried for too long. I wasn't a loving mother who had given too much. I was a fool who had given everything. I had traded my financial independence for an illusion of closeness. I had bought affection and received only transactional politeness in return. And the wedding dress, the pale pink dress I had so proudly bought, a symbol of my hope and my love, now hung in the closet, a useless piece of fabric. I had spent so much time imagining how I would look, how I would smile for the photos I would never be in. It was a tangible metaphor for my entire relationship with them. My presence, my love, my very self was not a necessary part of their perfect picture. That night, I sat on my bed and finally let myself cry, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were hot, angry tears of frustration, of accumulated humiliation, of years of silently endured indifference. I cried for the woman I had been, the one who had so desperately tried to be indispensable to people who considered her completely dispensable. I cried for the foolish mother who had confused her love with money, who had believed that buying her son's affection was a valid, viable strategy for a lasting relationship. The tears felt like a cleansing fire, burning away the pain and revealing something new beneath the surface, a determination I didn't recognize, a steel resolve that had been dormant for far too long. When I woke up the next morning, something had shifted. The air was different. My heart felt lighter. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes, the same wrinkles, but now there was a flicker of something new, a spark of hardness I didn't recognize. I made my coffee as I had every morning for the past 20 years, but this time, I didn't think about Luke and Chelsea. I didn't check my phone for a message or a call. For the first time in a long time, the first person on my mind was me. The table where I had so often tallied their expenses and quietly cried over their indifference would now be the witness to something completely different. I was no longer the silent provider. I was a woman reclaiming her life, and I had just begun the first draft of my new financial statement. The newfound clarity was a fragile thing, like a sheet of ice forming over a turbulent river. It was a cold, hard truth, but it was mine. I went through the day in a daze, tending to my garden and tidying up the house, my actions mechanical, my mind replaying the numbers from the ledger. Each weed I pulled from the soil, each dust bunny I swept from the corners, felt like a small, deliberate act of reclaiming my space. My home was a sanctuary, a place I had always poured love into, but now it felt different. It was no longer just a house, it was a fortress, a symbol of my independence. The phone rang late that afternoon, and my heart gave a familiar jolt. I looked at the screen and saw Luke's name. A small part of me, the old, foolish part, hoped for an apology, a sign of remorse. But the new me, the one forged in the fire of betrayal, knew better. I let it ring. Once. Twice. The silence that followed felt like a victory, a small act of defiance. My phone, once a lifeline, was now a tool for my own peace. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time, it was Chelsea. I let it ring as well. Then a text message came from Luke. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk." I deleted the message without a second thought. For the first time in years, their needs were not my primary concern. I was a person, not a resource, and it was a truth I was finally learning to live. The next morning, the call came that I knew was inevitable. My phone, which I had almost forgotten to check, lit up with an unknown number. I hesitated, but something told me to answer. "Renata?" A voice, desperate and almost pleading, came through the speaker. It was Chelsea, but this was not the confident, cruelly sweet voice from 2 days ago. This was the voice of a cornered animal, a woman on the verge of panic. "Thank God you answered. It's me, Chelsea." "I know," I replied, my voice calm, almost emotionless. My own composure surprised me. I was no longer the trembling woman from the living room. "Renata, the rent is overdue," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The landlord is pressuring us. He says if we don't pay this week, he's going to evict us. You forgot to make the transfer." The audacity of her words was breathtaking. Forgot, as if my life had nothing else to do but serve as their personal finance manager. The word forgot hung in the air, a testament to her complete lack of empathy and her entitlement. I was silent for a few seconds, a million thoughts racing through my mind. I remembered all the times I had rushed to the bank, all the times I had canceled my own plans to make sure they had a roof over their heads. I thought of all the times I had eaten simple, cheap meals so I could give them money for their desires. And now, after they had so cruelly excluded me, they had the nerve to call me as if nothing had happened. "Chelsea," I said, my voice steady, "didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end of the line was so profound I could hear my own heart beating, strong and steady in my chest. For the first time in years, it was not me who was trembling, but her. "Renata, I don't understand," she stammered, the confidence gone from her voice. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. All lies, wrapped in that sweet, syrupy voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she had used to ask for money for her wedding dress, for their rings, for a down payment on their honeymoon, all things I had helped finance without knowing I would never see the ceremony where they were exchanged. For so many years, I had walked on eggshells, weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping for a crumb of affection from my own son. I was the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when they treated me like I was invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," had awakened something in me that had been dormant for far too long. The anger was no longer a storm on the horizon, it was a fire in my belly. I had calculated in my head how much money I had spent on them in those 5 years. Between rent, food, gifts, emergencies, and whims, it was well over $80,000 I had taken from my retirement, from my savings, from the money Robert had left so I could live my last years in peace. And what was all that for? To be treated like a stranger on my own son's wedding day. "The money is gone, Chelsea," I said, my voice cutting through her desperate pleas. "And so is the old me." I hung up before she could say another word, a final, definitive period at the end of a long, painful chapter. I sat there, the phone on the table, feeling strangely light, as if I had just shed an enormous weight. For the first time in years, my money was entirely mine. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. I was a free agent. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. That night, I thought about all the things I hadn't done to please them, the trips I hadn't taken to save money, the friends I no longer saw because I was always available for their emergencies, the hobbies I had given up because every dollar I spent on myself was a dollar less for their needs. Now, all those opportunities lay before me like an empty canvas. And I was finally ready to paint. I was no longer a river flowing for others. I was a lake, calm and deep, reflecting only the sky above. The silence was a gift. For the first time in years, the ringing of my phone didn't send a jolt of anxiety through me. I spent the next few days in a state of quiet grace, rediscovering the simple pleasures of my own company. I sat in my garden, pruning the rose bushes, feeling the sun on my skin. I reread a book I had loved in college, getting lost in its pages without the constant worry of an impending financial emergency. I even treated myself to a new set of gardening gloves, a small but meaningful act of self-care. The world hadn't ended without my money flowing into Luke and Chelsea's lives. In fact, my world felt like it had finally begun. But the silence was not to last. Exactly a week after my final call with Chelsea, I heard a car pull into my driveway. The sound was so jarring, so unexpected, that my heart leaped into my throat. I hadn't had visitors in months, not without a prearranged, pre-approved purpose related to my son's life. I peered through the window and saw 3 cars parked in front of my door: Luke's familiar SUV, Chelsea's compact car, and a third, a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. My blood ran cold. They had keys to my house. I had given them a spare set years ago, a gesture of trust, a foolish belief that they would one day take care of me just as I had taken care of them. I took a deep breath, the taste of fear in my mouth, and walked toward the front door. This was it, the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door to a scene that felt like a surreal nightmare. Luke was sitting on my living room sofa with his head in his hands. Chelsea was pacing back and forth like a caged animal. And a third person, a man in a crisp gray suit, was standing by my dining table holding a folder filled with papers. My personal documents. What is happening here? I asked, my voice sounding louder and more firm than I expected. All 3 of them looked at me as if I were the intruder in my own home. Chelsea was the first to speak, her voice no longer desperate, but filled with a new, forced urgency. "Renata, thank God you're here. We've been so worried." She gestured to the man in the suit. "This is Mr. Fisher. He's from the law firm we consulted about your situation." My situation? The question came out of my mouth with a calm that surprised even me. "What situation? I'm doing perfectly fine." Luke finally lifted his head and looked at me with those eyes that once belonged to an innocent child and now only reflected a kind of financial panic. "Mom, we went to the bank. They told us you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Klein explained that you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you would do that." Mr. Fisher, a man in his late 50s with a slick smile that didn't reach his eyes, approached me with an outstretched hand. "Ms. Miller, I am Mr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I walked directly to my dining table and took the folder from his grasp. "These are my private papers. You have no right to look at them without my consent." "Mom," Luke interjected, his voice carrying that condescending tone he had perfected in recent years. "We're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you financially cut us off without an explanation. Then you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help." Chelsea approached, her hand reaching for mine with a false tenderness she reserved for moments when she needed something. "Renata, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal." The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm bell. In that moment, the entire scheme became crystal clear. They hadn't brought a lawyer to help me. They had brought one to declare me mentally incompetent and seize control of my finances. The same woman who had told me they only invited special people to their wedding was now treating me like a senile old lady. "I am not confused," I said with a firmness that silenced everyone. "I am clearer than I have been in years, and you are all going to leave my house right now." "Mrs. Miller, Mr. Fisher interjected, his voice professional and reasonable. "I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They have documented several concerning behaviors." Concerning behaviors. A laugh, hoarse and almost cruel, came from my throat. "Like what?" "Deciding that my money belongs to me. Deciding to no longer finance the lives of 2 adults who treat me like trash." Chelsea jumped up as if I had slapped her. "We never treated you badly. You are part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We are just speeding up the process." There it was, the naked, unvarnished truth. In their minds, I was already dead and they were just collecting their inheritance in advance. It didn't matter if I had 70 years or 70 days left to live. To them, I was just an ATM with legs, and my malfunction was now a legal problem to be solved. "Out," I said, pointing to the front door. "All three of you, get out of my house." Luke stood up, his face a mask of childish anger. "Mom, we can't just leave, we have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off from one day to the next." "I can't." My voice rose for the first time. "Who says I can't? For years, I have paid rent that wasn't even in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a house where I was not welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me." "Mr." Fisher took a folder from his briefcase. "Mrs. Miller, we have prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Luke and Chelsea to manage your finances more efficiently. This would just be temporary until you feel better." I took the folder, and without even opening it, I threw it directly into the trash can. "The only transition that is going to happen here," I said, "is yours to the front door." Chelsea started to cry, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of contained rage. "You can't do this to us, Renata. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We took on financial obligations because we knew we could count on you." "Obligations based on my money," I replied. "Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company, just on my money. And now that I have decided that my money is better used in my own life, I am suddenly a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship." Luke tried to approach me, but I took a step back. "Mom, we made mistakes. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Chelsea was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you just become reasonable again." Reasonable. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like a stranger. It means pretending it doesn't hurt to have been excluded from the most important day of my only son's life. "Mr." Fisher packed his papers with the efficiency of someone who is used to having proposals rejected. "Mrs. Miller, this is not over. Your family has legal options." "Perfect," I replied. "Hire all the lawyers you want, with your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums." As they walked to the door, Luke turned to me one last time. "Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone, with no one to take care of you when you really need it." "Luke," I said, with a deep sadness but also with crystalline clarity, "I am already alone. The difference is that now it's by my own choice, not by your neglect." I closed the door behind them and stood in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night I couldn't sleep, but not from sadness or regret. My mind was a whirlwind of adrenaline, a general preparing for battle. The emotional exhaustion of the day had given way to a sharp, tactical focus. If Luke and Chelsea wanted a war, I would give them one. But it would be a war I fought with intelligence, not with emotion. The next morning, I was up at dawn, dressed in my best suit and ready to go. My first stop was the law office of Mr. Ethan Clark. I had met him years ago when I was handling my husband's will, and I remembered him as a man of impeccable reputation and quiet competence. Mr. Clark, a man with a kind face and a no-nonsense demeanor, listened to my story without interrupting. I told him everything: the secret wedding, the humiliation, the years of financial support, and the final confrontation with Mr. Fisher, the lawyer they had brought to my home. "Mrs. Miller," he said, leaning forward in his chair. What your children attempted to do yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and in many jurisdictions, it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation of your privacy and can be seen as harassment. His words were both a comfort and a shock. They comforted me because they confirmed I wasn't crazy, that what had happened was truly abusive and not some misunderstanding. They shocked me because I realized the situation was far more serious and calculated than I had initially thought. "We have to document everything," Mr. Clark continued, his voice calm and methodical. "Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We will also change your will to protect your assets from future manipulation attempts." We spent the next 3 hours poring over my financial records. I had brought the ledger and bank statements from my grim accounting session. Mr. Clark whistled softly when he saw the total sum. $80,000 in 5 years, he said, shaking his head. "Mrs. Miller, with this money, you could have traveled the world, lived comfortably, and enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding." His words, while a painful reminder, also felt like a validation. A professional had seen the truth. When I left Mr. Clark's office, I had a complete 3-step plan. First, I would change all the locks on my house. Second, I would install a security system with cameras to protect myself from future surprise visits. Third, I would open a new bank account at a different bank where they had no contact and close all existing accounts. Fourth, and most importantly, I would begin to live the life I had postponed for years. My next stop was a hardware store. The owner, a friendly man named Tom, had known me for years. He'd seen me countless times, always buying things to fix something in Luke and Chelsea's apartment. A new faucet, a box of nails, a can of paint. This time was different. "Mrs. Miller, what brings you in today?" he asked with the familiarity of a person who had silently witnessed my wasted generosity. "Another emergency with your son?" "No, Tom," I replied, a small smile touching my lips. "This time, it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want the best quality ones you have." He looked at me with a surprised but unspoken understanding. While he was gathering the locks, his son, Ethan, a young man who installed security systems, came by. It was Providence in action. "Ethan," I told him, "I also need to install a surveillance system, the complete package. The price is not an issue." While they were preparing everything for the installation the next day, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was Chelsea using someone else's phone because I had blocked her number. "Renata, it's Chelsea. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults." "Speak," I said dryly. "Listen, I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Luke and I have talked about it, and we want to make it up to you. How about we have a special dinner to celebrate our marriage with you? We can do it at your house. Cook together like we used to." The manipulation in her words was so obvious it was almost laughable. This was not a plea for reconciliation, it was a plea for money. "Chelsea, how much rent do you owe exactly?" The silence on the other end confirmed that I had hit a nerve. Well, it's 2 months overdue. That's $3,000 total. But I'm not just calling for that, Renata. We really miss you in our lives." "Do you miss me or my money?" I asked directly. "Both," she replied with a surprising, almost pathetic honesty. "Renata, I won't lie to you. Yes, we need your financial help, but we love you too. You're important to us." "If I'm so important," I said, my voice rising with a controlled fury, "why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why am I not important enough to get a call that doesn't ask for money? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was doing?" Another silence. We both knew the answer. Never. Chelsea, I'm only going to explain this to you once. For 5 years, you have treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me. You ignored me. You humiliated me. And finally, you insulted me in the worst possible way. Now that the money is running out, you suddenly discover you love me. Renata, please. I cut her off. There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to be at your wedding. Now I'm making mine. I hung up and turned the phone off completely. I didn't want any more interruptions on my day of liberation. That afternoon, I went to the beauty salon I hadn't been to in over a year. I always canceled my appointments because Luke or Chelsea needed something urgent, or because the money I had set aside for myself became an emergency for them. Mrs. Miller, my favorite client. My hairdresser, Cynthia, called out. What a surprise! I thought you had forgotten us. I didn't forget you, Cynthia. I replied. I just forgot that I also deserve to be pampered. I treated myself to the full treatment, cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. While Cynthia worked on my hair, she told me about her life, her children, her dreams. It was refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Luke and Chelsea's needs. You look beautiful, Mrs. Miller, Cynthia said when she was done. But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen? Yes, Cynthia, I said, a genuine smile on my face. I finally learned to say no. When I got home, there was a car in front of my door that I didn't recognize. My heart raced for a moment, thinking Luke and Chelsea might have come back with reinforcements, but as I got closer, I saw an older woman sitting on the steps of my porch. Mrs. Miller? She asked as I got out of the car. Yes, that's me. Can I help you? I'm Alina Brooks. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never had a chance to talk. Yesterday, I heard very loud voices in your house, and I got worried. Is everything okay? Her sincere concern touched me deeply. Here was a stranger who showed more interest in my well-being than my own son. Come in, Mrs. Brooks, I said. I'll make you a coffee, and I'll tell you a story you won't believe. I led Alina into my kitchen and put a kettle on to boil. The house, which had felt like a fortress just hours ago, now seemed to breathe with a newfound warmth in her presence. As I spooned coffee grounds into the mugs, I began to tell her everything. The story tumbled out of me, a flood of pent-up pain, frustration, and eventual triumph. I started with the day of Robert's death, the feeling of losing my anchor, and the way I had clung to Luke and Chelsea as my new purpose. I recounted every financial transaction, every ignored call, every humiliation. I spoke about the wedding, the pale pink dress, and the chilling words, "We only invited special people." Alina listened without interrupting, her eyes fixed on me with a profound empathy that I hadn't seen in years. Her face, lined with the wisdom of a life lived, held a quiet understanding. When I finished, the kettle whistled, and the only sound was the steam rising from our mugs. Mrs. Miller, she said finally, her voice soft but firm, you did the right thing, every single part of it. She took a sip of her coffee, her gaze still steady. I went through something similar with my daughter about 5 years ago. I also thought it was my duty to finance her adult life. I also believed they wouldn't love me if I didn't give them money. Her words were a balm to my wounded soul. I had felt so alone, so foolish. Hearing that someone else had walked a similar path and come out of it whole was a revelation. What happened? I asked, leaning forward eagerly. I cut off the money when I realized she only called me when she needed something. At first, it was terrible. The threats, the emotional blackmail, the guilt trips, you name it, I heard it. But after about 6 months, she called to genuinely apologize. She had to get a second job. Her husband stopped playing golf every weekend and started looking for extra work. They learned to live within their means, and more importantly, they learned that I was a person, not a resource. Her story gave me hope. It was a roadmap to a place I desperately wanted to go, a real relationship based on love, not money. Do you think Luke and Chelsea will ever understand one day? I asked, a flicker of the old hope returning. Maybe yes, maybe no, as she answered honestly. But that's no longer your responsibility, Mrs. Miller. Your responsibility now is to live your own life. That's the hardest part and the most rewarding. Her words echoed what I had felt in the hardware store, that the true work was not in cutting them off, but in rebuilding myself. She was right. The past was a painful lesson, but the future was a clean slate. That night, for the first time in 5 years, I went to bed without worrying about whether Luke and Chelsea had money for rent, for food, for their whims. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and I slept better than I had in years. The next day, Ethan from the hardware store and his father, Tom, arrived at 8:00 a.m. to change the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone didn't stop ringing from unknown numbers. Chelsea was still trying to contact me from different phones, but I had developed a new skill, completely ignoring calls that didn't suit me. Mrs. Miller, Ethan said as he installed the final camera, this system will give you absolute peace of mind. You can see from your phone who is coming to your house even when you're not here. And if someone breaks in without permission, an alert is automatically sent to the police. The irony was not lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son, but it didn't hurt as much as it used to. It was simply a practical, necessary measure to maintain my newfound peace. While they were working, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years: call my sister, Diana, who lived in Chicago. We had lost touch because every time we talked, I would tell her about Luke and Chelsea's successes, about how much money I had spent on them, about how proud I was to be able to help them. I now realized that our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family news. Sarah, Diana answered, her voice filled with surprise. Sister, how are you? We haven't spoken in months. I'm good, Diana, better than good. I'm calling you to tell you that I've finally come to my senses. I told her the whole story from the beginning: the secret wedding, the humiliation, the visit with the lawyer, my decision to cut off the funding. Diana listened in silence, and when I was done, her answer surprised me. Sarah, it was about time. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you something, but I didn't know how. What did you want to tell me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. That Luke never spoke lovingly about you when I saw him at family gatherings. It was always, my mom helped me with this, or my mom bought me that, but never, I miss my mom, or I love my mom. It was as if you were a service provider, not a person. Her words hurt, but it was a necessary pain, like a surgeon cleaning an infected wound. It hurt, but it was part of the healing. You know what else I noticed? Diana continued. Chelsea always spoke about you in the future tense. When Renata is no longer here, we can remodel her house, or when we inherit, we will invest in the business. As if they were waiting for you to die to really live. This revelation hit me like a bucket of ice water. They didn't just see me as an ATM, they saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and their money. While I was trying to make them happy, they were planning their future without me. The full, cold truth of their betrayal settled in my heart, and for the first time, I felt a kind of peace with it. There was no going back. There was no hope for reconciliation. I was finally free. After talking with Diana, I sat in my kitchen, a single cup of coffee in front of me, processing all this new information. The revelations were like puzzle pieces falling into place, completing a picture I had been too blind to see. For 5 years, I had believed I was building a family, but they had been waiting for me to die. My own son, my flesh and blood, had seen me not as a mother, but as a future inheritance. The thought was a cold, hard stone in my stomach, but it was also, strangely, liberating. The emotional debt was canceled. The hope for a fairy tale ending was gone, and in its place was a clear, unclouded path forward. A gentle knock on the door startled me. My new cameras, a source of profound comfort, showed me it was Alina with a steaming mug in her hands. She had promised to check in on me after our coffee the day before. I opened the door, and she handed me the mug. "I thought you might need some company," she said, with that sincere smile I was already beginning to appreciate. We sat in my living room, and I told her about my conversation with Diana. Alina listened, nodding occasionally. "My daughter said the exact same things to me," she said when I finished. "You're like a second mom to me. We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway." Those are rehearsed phrases, Sarah. They learn them from the Emotional Manipulation Handbook. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Do you think such a handbook exists?" "Not officially, but it seems everyone reads from the same book," she replied. Chapter 1 is Make Her Feel Indispensable. Chapter 2 is Create Constant Financial Emergencies. Chapter 3 is When She Resists, Question Her Mental Health. It was both funny and tragic to recognize such predictable patterns in our own children's behavior. "Did you ever feel guilty for cutting off the money?" I asked Alina. "Every single day for the first 3 months," she answered honestly. But then I started to see the results. My daughter had to get a second job. Her husband stopped playing golf every weekend and started looking for extra work. They learned to live within their means. And more importantly, they learned that I was a person, not a resource. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had postponed for years: visit Robert's grave. I always made excuses not to go, claiming Luke or Chelsea needed something urgent, or that the taxi fare was better invested in one of their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet and beautiful. Robert's grave looked a bit neglected, a testament to my neglect in recent months. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and talked to him as if he were alive. "Robert, my love, I think I lost myself for a while," I whispered. "After you left, I put all my energy into Luke. I wanted to be the best mother in the world. I think in the process, I forgot to be myself. Our son has become someone I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always like this, and I just didn't want to see it." The wind blew gently, and for a moment I felt like he was listening. "The money you left for me to live peacefully, I spent it taking care of them. But not anymore, my love, I have learned." I cleaned his grave, replaced the withered flowers with new ones, and stayed there for another hour, simply enjoying the peace. For the first time in years, I was not in a hurry to get home to solve a crisis for them. When I got home, there were 3 cars parked in front of my door again. My heart raced, but this time I was prepared. The cameras on my phone showed me that it was Luke, Chelsea, and 2 other people I didn't recognize. Everyone seemed agitated, talking and pointing at my house. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called Mr. Clark, my lawyer. "Mr. Clark, they are at my house again. This time, they've brought more people. What should I do?" "Don't get out of the car, Mrs. Miller. I'll be there right away and I'll call the police." After our conversation yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. They are not allowed to be on your property. Minutes later, Mr. Clark and 2 police patrol cars arrived. I watched from my car as the officers talked to Luke and Chelsea. I saw my son gesticulate angrily. I saw Chelsea crying again, but this time her tears did not move me. One of the officers approached my car. "Ma'am, you can get out safely. Your visitors are going to leave immediately." As I got out of the car, Luke shouted at me from the street. "Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son." "Luke," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. "Family doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into people's homes without permission. Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs." Chelsea screamed from across the street. You're going to pay us everything you owe us. We have bills you co-signed for. You can't just abandon us like this." "Mr." Clark interjected. "Mrs. Miller and Mr. Miller, any future communication must be through my office, and I suggest you consult with an attorney before making collection threats, because my client has full documentation of all the payments she voluntarily made for 5 years." I watched them drive away in their cars, defeated but not giving up. I knew this wasn't over, but for the first time in this situation, I felt confident. I had professional help. I had emotional support from a leaner. And more importantly, I had a mental clarity about what was right and what was wrong. That night, Alina invited me to her house for dinner. I met her daughter, who was visiting, and I was able to see with my own eyes what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke respectfully to each other, asked sincerely about each other's lives, and laughed together. The daughter didn't ask for money once the entire evening. I wanted that with Luke, too. I confessed to Alina after her daughter had left. "And maybe you'll get it one day," she replied. "But first, he has to learn that you are a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income." For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about the future. The next few days were strangely peaceful. The surveillance cameras showed me that Luke and Chelsea were driving past my house several times a day, sometimes slowly. Sometimes they parked for a few minutes, but without getting out. It was as if they were studying my routine, looking for the perfect moment for their next move. Mr. Clark had advised me to document every one of these visits, so I kept a detailed log with the date and time. "Their persistence will work in our favor," he had said. "Every time they show up after we've told them not to approach, it strengthens our case for a permanent restraining order." On Friday morning, I was calmly having breakfast when the doorbell rang. The cameras showed me a very well-dressed young woman with a folder in her hands and a professional smile. I didn't recognize her, but something about her posture told me it was not a social visit. I took a deep breath before opening the door, a sense of quiet readiness settling over me. "Good morning, Mrs. Sarah Miller," she said. "I am a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services. We have received a report that you may be in an at-risk situation, and we need to conduct a wellness check." My blood ran cold. Luke and Chelsea had escalated the situation. It was no longer just threats from private lawyers. Now they had involved the government. "Can I see your ID?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Of course." She showed me an official ID that looked genuine. "I am social worker Mrs. Schmidt. Can I come in and talk to you?" I let her in, knowing that a refusal would have been worse for my case. Mrs. Schmidt sat down in my living room and took a form out of her folder. "Mrs. Miller, we have received reports that you have shown significant changes in your financial behavior, that you have cut off communication with your family, and that you have shown signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told that you have refused medical and legal help from your loved ones." Every word had been carefully chosen to make me sound like a mentally disturbed old woman. I recognized Chelsea's manipulative touch in the wording. She had always been skilled at twisting words to get what she wanted. "Miss Schmidt," I said with all the dignity I could muster, "I would like to call my lawyer before answering any questions." "Ma'am, this is not a legal interrogation. It's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, it should not be a problem to speak with me." The phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," infuriated me. It was the same logic abusers used to justify their invasions. "Miss, I'm calling my lawyer. You can wait here or come back another day, but I will not answer any questions without legal representation present." I called Mr. Clark, and he was there within 20 minutes. When he came in and saw the social worker, his expression hardened. "Miss Schmidt," he said after checking her ID, I hope you have a court order to be here because my client is under my legal representation and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment. Sir, Mrs. Schmidt replied with less confidence than before. We have reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It's our duty to investigate. What family? Mr. Clark asked dryly. The same family that tried to get her to sign a power of attorney without representation. The same family that broke into her house without permission and checked her private documents. The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money. Mr. Clark took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. Here, I have complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. Over $80,000 that were withdrawn from her accounts in 5 years. Systematic social exclusion and emotional blackmail. If someone needs to be investigated here, it is not my client. Mrs. Schmidt reviewed the documents with growing discomfort. It was obvious that the information she had been given did not match the reality she had in front of her. Mrs. Miller, she said finally, can you explain to me why you so abruptly stopped financial support for your son? Because I finally discovered they were using me, I replied simply. Because I realized that to them I wasn't a mother, but a bank account. Because I was tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as an obstacle. But don't you feel it's your responsibility to help your family? The question outraged me. Miss Schmidt, I said, my voice firm. My responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until he was 18, to educate him, and to give him the tools to be an independent adult. My son is 30 years old, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my responsibility. It is my choice, and I have chosen not to do so anymore. Mr. Clark interjected. Miss Schmidt, would you consider it normal for a 30-year-old adult to be unable to pay his own rent without the help of his 55-year-old mother? Mrs. Schmidt did not answer right away. I could see she was reevaluating the entire situation. Mrs. Miller, she asked after a moment, do you manage your own finances completely? I can show you my bank statements, my investments, my tax payments. Everything is current and in order. Do you live independently? As you can see, I keep my house clean. I take care of myself physically. I drive my own car. I have healthy social relationships with my neighbors. Do you take any medication? Just vitamins and occasionally aspirin. I don't have any medical conditions that require medication. Mr. Clark added, my client has just undergone extensive medical exams as part of our legal process. She is in perfect mental and physical condition. Mrs. Schmidt closed her folder. Mrs. Miller, based on this conversation and the documentation I have reviewed, I see no indication that you are at risk or in need of intervention. I will close this case. After she left, Mr. Clark and I remained silent for a few minutes. Sarah, he said finally, this is going to continue to escalate. Luke and Chelsea are spending money. They don't have to hire professionals to try to have you declared incompetent. Does that mean they are desperate? It means exactly that. What else can they do? They can file a lawsuit for incompetence. It's expensive and hard to win, but if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify in their favor, they could get a guardian assigned. The thought terrified me. They could take control of my money. They could try, but we had solid evidence that I was completely competent and that they were motivated by greed and not by genuine concern. That afternoon, I called Diana to vent. Sister, she said after hearing my story, do you notice how far they are willing to go for money? They are risking family relationships, spending money on lawyers and doctors, destroying their own reputation, all to get access to your bank account again. Her words made me think. Luke and Chelsea had completely revealed their true nature. There was no going back. There was no possibility of a genuine reconciliation. To them, I had never been a mother or a respected mother-in-law. I had always just been money on legs. This revelation, although painful, was also liberating. I no longer had to wonder if I was making the right decision. I no longer had to feel guilty for protecting myself. They had proven for themselves that my emotional and physical well-being was less important to them than my money. That evening, Alina came to visit with a surprise. She had invited a few friends from her garden club to meet me. "Sarah," she introduced me, "these are my friends Maria, who you know from the salon, Carmen, and Alfreda." We sat in my living room, the atmosphere warm and comforting. As I told them about the incompetence lawsuit, everyone was outraged. "Sarah," Maria said, "we will testify in your favor. We've been with you for weeks, and anyone can see that you're doing great." "Better than great," Carmen added. "You are clearer and stronger than many women half your age." Alfreda, a woman in her 80s with the quiet wisdom of a person who has seen it all, took my hands. "Sarah, my dear, what your children are doing is nothing new. For generations, greedy children have tried to declare their parents insane to get their money. But you have something many of these victims didn't have: documentation, legal support, and friends who can testify for you." Her words gave me hope. I was not alone in this fight. I had an army of strong women who had witnessed my transformation firsthand. You know what the saddest thing about all this is? I confessed. That Luke and Chelsea are willing to destroy any future possibility of reconciliation for money. Even if I were willing to forgive everything so far, there's no going back from this. "And maybe that's for the best," Alfreda replied. "At least now you know exactly who they are and you can act accordingly." That night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I really cried. Not out of sadness, but out of grief. I said my final goodbye to the son I thought I had, to the dream of a loving family, to the illusion that unconditional love was reciprocated. But something new also emerged within me. An iron determination not to let myself be stripped not only of my money, but also of my dignity and my freedom. The war had officially begun, but I was ready to fight. The trial came 3 weeks later. I woke up early, put on my best black suit, and looked at myself in the mirror with a determination I had never felt before. Today, not only my mental capacity would be judged, but my dignity as a person, my right to live free from abuse, and my value beyond my bank account would be judged as well. Mr. Clark arrived at 7 a.m. to go over our strategy one last time. "Sarah, remember, the burden of proof is on them. They have to prove that you are incompetent. We just have to show that you are not." We arrived at the courthouse at 9 a.m. In the hallway, I saw Luke in a new suit that he probably bought for the occasion, and Chelsea dressed in black as if she were at a funeral. Maybe it was the funeral of our family relationship. When our eyes met, Luke avoided my gaze, but Chelsea held my gaze with a coldness that confirmed that for her, this was just a business transaction. Their lawyer was an older, elegant man with the kind of confidence that comes from winning similar cases before. When he began his opening statement, his strategy was clear: to portray me as a confused old woman who had been manipulated by strangers to alienate me from my loving family. "Your Honor," he said in a solemn voice, "Mrs. Sarah Miller has shown a clear mental decline in recent months. She has cut off all financial support for her family without a rational explanation. She has installed unnecessary security systems due to paranoia and has isolated herself from her loved ones under the influence of neighbors and lawyers who are obviously taking advantage of her vulnerable situation." Every word had been carefully chosen to make my self-empowerment sound like dementia and my freedom sound like external manipulation. Then they called their witnesses. Chelsea was the first to testify, and her performance was Oscar-worthy. She cried as she described how I had completely changed, how I had become hostile and paranoid, and how I had isolated myself from the family that loved me. "Your Honor," she said in a trembling voice, "Renata has always been like a second mom to me. Seeing her mental decline has been devastating. We just want to help her get the care she needs." Lies wrapped in convincing tears. When Mr. Clark cross-examined her, the cracks in her story began to become visible. "Mrs. Miller, can you tell the court when was the last time you called my client without asking for money?" Chelsea stammered. "Well, we always talked about many things. Can you give me a specific date? I don't remember exact dates. Is it true that you and your husband got married without inviting my client? It was a very small ceremony. Is it true that when my client asked about the wedding, you told her that you had only invited special people?" Chelsea's face turned red. Those words were taken out of context. What would be the right context to tell your mother-in-law that she is not a special person? She couldn't answer convincingly. Luke was next. Seeing him on the witness stand, swearing to tell the truth while preparing to lie about my mental health, was one of the most painful moments of my life. This was the boy I had raised alone, the one I had dedicated my entire life to. "My mom has always been very generous with us," he testified. "But lately, she has become erratic and irrational. We believe she is being manipulated by people who are taking advantage of her." When Mr. Clark cross-examined him, the mask fell completely. "Mr. Miller, how much money have you received from your mother in the last 5 years?" "I don't know the exact amount. Does $80,000 sound about right?" "Maybe. She's always been generous." "And how many times have you visited your mother without asking her for money?" The silence was deafening. "Is it true that you and your wife broke into my client's house without permission and checked her private documents? We were worried about her." "Is it true that you brought a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney?" "We wanted to help her manage her finances." "Do you, at 30 years old, need the help of your 55-year-old mother to pay your rent?" Luke couldn't answer with dignity. The rest of their witnesses, including a paid expert and a neighbor who had a grudge, fell apart under Mr. Clark's careful questioning. The lies were exposed. Now it was our turn. With their witnesses discredited, it was our turn. Mr. Clark called my friends first. Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda took the stand and testified about my newfound vitality. They spoke of my clarity, my engagement, and the new life I had built for myself. They were honest and direct, painting a picture of a woman who was thriving, not declining. Eleanor, my neighbor, delivered a powerful testimony about my physical and mental well-being, directly contradicting Luke and Chelsea's claims of isolation and paranoia. She spoke of our friendship, our shared experiences, and how she had seen me blossom after a period of silent suffering. Then, Mr. Clark called my pharmacist, a man who, with obvious remorse, explained how Chelsea had tricked him into signing a statement that twisted the truth about my medication habits. He apologized to me directly from the stand, a public admission of her deceit. Dr. Moore, the psychiatrist Mr. Clark had hired, then took the stand. She was a woman of impeccable credentials and calm authority. She presented the court with the results of her cognitive and psychological tests, which were flawless. She stated, without a shred of doubt, that I was not only mentally competent, but also showed an extraordinary resilience in the face of emotional trauma. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I stood up with a dignity I hadn't known I possessed and walked to the witness stand. The courtroom was silent, every eye on me. As I raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth, I felt the weight of my 55 years of experience, of wisdom gained through pain, and of strength discovered in adversity. Mr. Clark guided me through my testimony, letting me tell my whole story in my own words. The $80,000 spent in 5 years, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the constant emotional manipulation, the violation of my privacy, the legal threats. My voice was steady, my words clear, my truth undeniable. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Clark finally asked, why did you decide to stop financial support for your son and daughter-in-law? Because I finally understood that what I was getting from them was not love, I replied, my voice clear and loud enough for everyone in the courtroom to hear. It was a commercial transaction disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome, but I, as a person, was not. Do you regret your decision? I only regret that it took me so long to make it. Luke and Chelsea's lawyer tried to make me appear confused during his cross-examination, but I answered every one of his questions with clarity and precision. When he tried to imply that my new friendships had manipulated me, I explained to him that for the first time in years, I had relationships based on mutual respect and not on financial interest. I looked him directly in the eye and told him that my new friends were the ones who had helped me see the truth my own son had tried to hide. In his closing argument, Luke and Chelsea's lawyer insisted that I was a victim of external manipulation and that my behavior was proof of my mental decline. Mr. Clark's rebuttal was devastating. Your Honor, what we have seen here is not the case of an incompetent old woman. It is the case of a woman who has finally found the strength to free herself from years of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs have presented no real medical evidence of mental incompetence. What they have presented is their frustration because their source of income has decided to exercise her legal and moral right to protect her own resources. He concluded by bringing up the stark contrast between Luke's concerning behavior, his refusal to work, his entitlement, his legal threats, and my irrational behavior, my efforts to secure my home, my renewed social life, and my decision to spend my own money on myself. The irony was not lost on the court. Judge Miller retired to deliberate. The 2 hours that followed felt like an eternity. I sat between Mr. Clark and a leaner, holding her hand. My heart was pounding, but my mind was at peace. No matter the outcome, I had spoken my truth. I had fought for myself. I had won back my dignity. When the judge returned, his expression was serious but clear. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he began, his voice resonating through the silent courtroom, "It is obvious to this court that Mrs. Sarah Miller is in full possession of her mental faculties. Professional psychiatric evaluations confirm her cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, as painful as they may be for her family, are completely rational and within her rights." My heart began to beat faster, a drum of hope in my chest. Furthermore, the judge continued, "The evidence suggests that this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest rather than by genuine concern for Mrs. Miller's well-being. The court finds the plaintiff's claims without merit. The request for guardianship is completely denied. I had won. I had not only won the lawsuit, but also my freedom, my dignity, my right to live free from the abuse of those who supposedly loved me. The gavel fell with a final, echoing thud. The case was closed. As the judge's words sank in, a wave of profound relief washed over me. I looked at Mr. Clark, and he gave me a small, victorious smile. I looked at Alina, and she squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. I had won, and I hadn't been alone. When we left the courthouse, I saw Luke and Chelsea talking angrily with their lawyer. Chelsea gave me a look of pure hatred before she walked away, her face a mask of rage and defeat. Luke looked at me one last time, and for a second I saw something that could have been regret, but it was already too late. He turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped, not a victorious man, but a broken one. The silence that followed was a strange kind of symphony, the sound of a chapter finally closing. That night, Alina organized a celebration at my house with all our friends. The living room, which had been the scene of so much pain and confrontation, was now filled with light and laughter. We toasted to justice, to freedom, to the sisterhood of strong women who support each other. "Sarah," Alfreda told me, raising her glass, "today you didn't just win a trial, you won back your life." She was right. For the first time in years, the future was completely mine. I could travel, I could love, I could create. I could live without fear, without guilt, without manipulation. The past 5 years had been a cage, and I had finally found the key. 3 months later, I sold my house. The old house held too many ghosts, too many memories of a love that was unreciprocated and a life that was not my own. I donated half of my money to organizations that protect the elderly from family abuse. It was a way of honoring the pain I had been through and ensuring that other women like me would have a lifeline when they needed it most. With the other half, I began to live the life I had always wanted. I bought a beautiful apartment near the city center, a place with a small balcony perfect for my morning coffee. I took art classes, joined a local volunteer group, and started planning a trip to Italy, a dream I had put off for decades. I never heard from Luke and Chelsea again. I heard from others that they had to move to a smaller apartment and that Chelsea had found a job for the first time in years. Perhaps the adversity would teach them what my generosity never could, the value of honest work and independence. Some nights, when I look at the stars from my new balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago, fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is dead. And in her place, someone has been born who has understood a fundamental truth. True love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. My name is Sarah. I am 55 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I have to love and protect is myself. Thank you for listening to my story. May your life be filled with health, happiness, and the warmth of a loving family.